ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our May's International Webinar, Rehabilitation and Management of Overpumped Aquifer in a Changing Climate. Adding to the free sessions of this first part of the Groundwater World Congress, a joint achievement of IAH, ALSUD, and ABAS. We started with 8 sessions in September, and after 18 webinars, we reached more than 19,000 views. That's a very good number. If you have missed them, please access ABA's YouTube channel. It's all there and you can see. We remind you that we will offer 2 sessions per month until August 2021, when we will host the presential part of our event. 1 session more market-related and the other scientific. Please follow ABAS, IAH, and ALSUD on social media to stay informed. We have more than 900 participants on our 10 thematic WhatsApp groups, and our app has been downloaded by more than 400 participants. Also, on February 1st, we launched the online edition of FENAGUA, the National Water Trade Show, with more than 200 exhibitors. You can access it by visiting the event website, as it is in there, www.iah2020,000 Brazil, altogether, iah2020,000brazil.org. These always growing numbers are a proof of the successful digital strategy to create the world's largest groundwater community. We'd like to thank our sponsors, supporters, and expositors who allowed this great event to take place in Brazil. Sponsors: ANA, Agência Nacional de Águas e Saneamento Básico; Vale, the support of CBHSF, Comitê da Bacia Hidrográfica do Rio São Francisco, Agência Peixe Vivo. Exhibitors: Altri, Bodega do Poço, Chicago Pneumatic, ou Chicago Pneumatic para brasileiros, Ebara, LG, Maxi Água, The Groundwater Project, CRI Bombas, Lepono, Aragon Sondagens, Clean Environment, Franklin Electric, Pazzi Hidrometria, Perfuratrizes DTH, Agência Peixe Vivo, ALS Laboratórios, BRAEN, Eurofins, GHidro Monitoramento, GLP Laboratórios, Exis, Insitu do Brasil, PRD Rigs, Trionic, Vapor Solution, Water Services and Technologies. We will have 3 short presentations today, followed by a roundtable where the viewers, like you, can participate by sending questions to the speakers. The questions may be sent by your app. Please download it by on your preferred app store. Just search for IAH 2021. Again, IAH 2021, or directly on your YouTube chat. This session has simultaneous translations into Portuguese also on YouTube. You can switch there and watch it and hear it in Portuguese if you like. Please make sure you direct your questions to one of our guests to make our lives easier, okay? This session is hosted by me, Everton de Oliveira, the president of the organizing committee of the 47th IAH Congress. And our guest speakers today are, for our honor and pleasure, Stephen Foster, professor at University College of London; Wolfgang Kinzelbach, ETH Zurich, head of the Sino-Swiss Groundwater Project; Yuanyuan Li, Vice President and Professor of the General Institute of Water Resources and Hydropower Planning and Design, GIWP, Ministry of Water Resources of China. Thank you very much, the three of you. It's an honor and a pleasure to have all of you here. And the project is so nice. I'm very sure the public will love it. Now, I'll introduce you our first guest, Stephen Foster, like I need to, right? But let's do the honors then. Stephen Foster has British Charter status as an environmental engineer and applied geologist with major international experience in groundwater assessment and management. And it is a visiting professor at University College London. Senior posts held include World Health Organization Groundwater Advisor for Latin American and Caribbean between 85 and 89, the British Geological Survey Divisional Director 1999, World Bank Groundwater Management Team Director between 2001 and 2012, International Association of Hydrogeologists President 2004-2008, Global Water Partnership Senior Advisor between 2012 and 15. International Water Association Chair of Groundwater Management Group between 2018-2022. Stephen received a DSc in 1983 for published work and also 9 various professional awards, including Institution of Water and Environmental Management, Whittaker Medal 1975, International Association of Hydrogeologists, President's Award 2004, and Geological Society of London, William Smith Medal 2006. Thank you, Stephen. It's very welcome. It's an honor again and to have a friend and such an important person for groundwater in the world. Thank you very much. Stage is yours, please.
Thank you, Everton, for that very kind introduction, and it's great to be able to participate in this important session. I'm going to share my screen now.
Thank you.
I hope.
Take your time. Good.
Can you see it now?
Yep.
You can?
I can. Just go full screen.
Okay. Okay?
No, not yet. You have to hit that, the full screen option down on the right there, bottom right.
Don't see that.
You see the slider there on your bottom right? On the left of the slider looks like a screen icon. Going there? No. In a kind of red instead of the blue thing.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm having slight difficulty with this.
That's okay. That's okay.
You can see the slides, but you can see them all. You can't see the...
It's not full screen yet. Yeah, go to your right now. Right, one more, two more, one more. Yes, that's the one.
Slideshow.
Perfect.
Yeah, now we're there.
Thank you.
Okay, right. So good afternoon from UK to everyone, and good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. I'm going to introduce the subject of intensive groundwater use and the difficult quest for sustainability under global change, and particularly under climate warming. There has been a massive growth in groundwater use for irrigation, put now at about 40% of all irrigation globally, and very important in many areas of the world. This is mainly private investment without much government stimulation. It's led to major improvements in rural livelihood and what I would call large groundwater-based economies. But unconstrained irrigation use generates excessive demand for groundwater, given the large land availability, and in most places begins to cause concern about resource sustainability. At the same time, groundwater is urban areas, major cities are becoming increasingly dependent on groundwater for their supplies. It's been estimated by people looking at things statistically that probably globally over 2 billion people now in urban areas depend on water for their water supply. This use is both by water utilities, big and small, and also by private self-supply, which makes it more difficult to control. And demand situation is being exacerbated and irrigated in many, in most climate change scenarios, because groundwater and its large storage is a key issue in adaptation to global warming. At the same time, rapid uncontrolled urbanization is placing groundwater resources at risk. I'm trying to give some personal reflections here on this topic. I've been providing management advice for considerable time now to administrations confronting excessive exploitation as well as pollution. I've seen great advances in evaluation tools, isotopes, models, satellite imagery, information systems, but practical application to improve resource management must be regarded as still being in its infancy. Basically, lower aquifer recharge has to mean less abstraction. There's abundant evidence that land use change and climate change are gradually modifying groundwater recharge rates, with the former, land use change, having a bigger effect at the moment than climate change. It's thus absolutely essential that resource administrators and resource allocations are not fixed in perpetuity. They need to be periodically revised in the light of groundwater system monitoring. And I'm afraid that this point, which is a really basic one, has not been adequately and clearly communicated to groundwater users in many countries. This puts groundwater resource managers in a fairly uncomfortable place. If we begin to look at the framework for groundwater resource management, obviously you start with resource appraisal, understanding the hydrogeological setting and its limitations, and the socio-economic situation that leads to demand for groundwater. You then have to start looking at possible management interventions. Can you intervene on the demand side? Can you intervene on the supply side? Through what routes and by what communication? You're concerned about state policy in some ways. If there isn't some top-down approach, things won't move. You definitely need community participation, and users have to understand the resource better. You also need some regulation, and you need finance to implement the measures required by a management plan. So basically, you've got this sort of strategic top-down level, and you've got the local level. They need to talk to one another, and you need both demand and supply side interventions, and you need the economic conditions to be favorable. I'm now going to just run through what I regard as a few key facets of groundwater management, and these will vary depending on where you are and what type of use you're dealing with. First of all, the scale of aquifer flow regimes and groundwater bodies. Where they're very large, the buffering storage allows adaptive management. So it allows you time to get your demand in line with recharge. You've got to understand groundwater resource renewability and how it's changing with land use change and climate change. And you've got to understand that there will be some very weakly recharged systems which essentially depend on their large storage, but have an element of time limit in their management. And you also need to know just how rapidly aquifers are susceptible to irreversible degradation, salinization, causing external land subsidence and damaging ecosystems. These things will depend, the susceptibility to these things will depend on how urgently you need to act and who are the stakeholders involved. So if I now look at the socioeconomic considerations, first of all, what type of users are we dealing with? Urban or rural? Relatively poor and numerous, or relatively affluent and very profitable irrigation? The numbers of users, the homogeneity of the community. It's easier if the community is homogeneous. If it isn't, this adds difficulty. Do they identify with their local aquifer? Can we aggregate the users so that we can have a dialogue with them? And in terms of the public administration, what is their capability in terms of resource management? So if we look at one route, there has to be an element of use regulation and charging. We need a balanced public participation. We need local government to help implement difficult decisions. We need simple regulations. Sometimes well drilling controls and minimum spacing can be effective. Where we are rewarding rights for abstraction, we have to recognize that these are rights to use, but not to ownership of the resource. They apply more easily to a moderate number of high value users. And it's better where possible to aggregate the small users and not deal with them individually. They need to be realistically based. And if groundwater resources are non-renewable, as in some instances in the arid regions they will be, this needs to be addressed, and the issue of what's going to happen in medium-term time needs to be explained. They also need to be subject to transferability constraints and periodic revision. And measurement is needed. We cannot have large numbers of users taking groundwater without monitoring their use. Community-based action is essential and can be good on its own. Self-regulation is a big step, and it's feasible for large groups of smaller users, but it almost needs somebody there permanently prompting the community and meeting regularly to promote action. And there's what I call to shift local behavior from competition for dwindling reserves with few winners to constructive dialogue on productive use with as many possible beneficiaries. We need to invest in irrigation technology, but, and this is extremely important and is not yet appreciated by the agricultural sector, there's a job here for groundwater people to communicate the agriculture more effectively. Irrigation water use efficiency is not a universal panacea for groundwater overuse, because you have to understand how much of the irrigation water returns were actually returning to an aquifer and available for reuse. And this is usually only a small proportion of the inefficiency part of irrigation. So better technology is important, but it doesn't mean a complete resolution of our resource problems. And to achieve real water savings, it's necessary to ensure that the measures are aimed at reducing non-beneficial evaporation rather than just irrigation returns, and to constrain irrigated area and reduce consumptive groundwater use rights. These are fairly complex and sophisticated concepts and not easy to put across to large numbers of relatively poorly educated irrigation users. On the recharge enhancement side, more can be done, and now is being done. The major IH initiative called the MAR initiative, led originally from Australia and now very much global, has certainly added significantly to recharge. In some countries, perhaps up to 10%, many much less than that. But it has to be understood that while you add water, you unless you manage demand at the same time, you'll rapidly return to a situation of overexploitation. I'm going to give just a couple of examples of partial successes. And I've taken them mainly from Latin America, or there's one from Asia, because the Congress is being held in that continent. Mendoza, Argentina has long been a major user of groundwater for highly productive water well irrigation for wine and fruit production. It's been threatened by groundwater salinization and falling water levels. And the local state water resource authority, under prompting from the World Bank and others, declared in 2000 numbers of water well drilling restriction zones with constraints on spatial transfer and reactivation of groundwater use rights. The system is mainly recharged from rivers because the local rainfall is absolutely minimal, and so you're dealing with a system on which you're dependent on riverbed recharge for most of the resource. The local agency also did excellent work with GIS-based inventory of irrigation wells and electricity supply, and mapped irrigation land at this level of detail. They intensified their monitoring. They estimated water well use better from electrical energy metering, and established joint charging with constraints on electricity access for people who were not paying. Consumptive use of groundwater tended to be increasing even while license abstraction was fixed, because of a move across the area from flood to drip irrigation. But by 2008, they had managed indication of water table recovery and reducing shallow groundwater salinity. But upstream impoundments of the rivers recharging the aquifers argued for continued caution. So that's a case that good progress has been made. A lot of detailed studies have been undertaken. The problem is now understood by the users, and it's on the way to solution. At the urban area, the best two examples I know of some success are Bangkok in Thailand, which was deeply troubled by flooding of the land due to land subsidence and over-exploitation. And then I'll go on to this subsequently, Lima in Peru. Private groundwater exploitation threatened excessive land subsidence in Bangkok. The local groundwater management agency, in fact, put a partial ban on new water well construction, closed some existing water wells, provided alternative sources of municipal water supplies, and metering and progressive charging for groundwater use. Whoops, sorry, I need to go back. How do I get back here? Well, actually, I'd almost finished the Bangkok case. The Lima case, which is going to illustrate, was another one in an urban area where an aquifer of relatively limited thickness in an extremely arid area was troubled by overexploitation, and it was rescued by investment to close numbers of wells and reduce abstraction in critical areas, to increase the capacity so that nearly all of the 8 million users could receive water conjunctively from both surface water when available and groundwater in the season of river floods and untreatable surface water. And this enabled an aquifer recovery of about 10 to 20 meters in many areas, and can be regarded as, under very difficult situations, a very limited recharge, a success story. I've temporarily lost my my screen. Let's see if I can get it back. Oh dear, sorry, I have lost my slide, my concluding slides. And if you can help me.
You just had to
Stop share and start again.
No, that was fine. You just have to go back on your presentation. That's okay.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oops.
Now share again.
Yeah, I'm getting there. Sorry for that interruption.
That's okay.
So that I'll just briefly show before going to my conclusions the Lima picture. That is the Lima recovery through the three methods: increased riverbed recharge, enabling conjunctive use by sharing surface and groundwater across the whole city, and constraining and closing some wells and improved metering. And the recovery can be seen. That was the rate of fall, and there was a minor recovery in subsequent years. So I'll now go to.
You have to share your screen. It's not.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Please. Not yet.
No? Oh dear, I'm sorry for this technical hiccup.
Well, that's okay. Take your time.
Yeah, I want to go back one slide.
But you have to share your screen first. It's not, we don't see it.
Oh, okay. That's the slide I want. So that's okay. If I now share the screen, you should. Gracias. Can you see my screen? Here it comes. Now, yes. And yes. So sorry for that slight technical interruption. I want to just now go to my conclusions. One, that really there's no simple blueprint for managing the situation. Strategies have to be tailored to resource settings. Strategy development requires understanding the use dynamics as well as the resource characteristics. It's very important to understand why people are using groundwater, what the benefits are and what the problems are. Management without user participation is absolutely impossible, but by users alone is often questionable. There are relatively few cases worldwide where users have made it on their own. Local government agencies having legal mandate and political backing as the groundwater guardian are critical to this process. For agricultural use, improving irrigation efficiency alone does not equate to real water savings and often can be the reverse. There's a need in groundwater management to confront explicitly the issue of non-renewable groundwater and weakly recharged aquifers and look about time dependency of their exploitation. Progress on this requires the push of local groundwater body champions and the pull of effective coordination. And piecemeal action is unlikely to be successful. And bottom-up actions always need some facilitation by top-down measures. That's more or less all I wanted to say. I think those conclusions and headline messages apply globally. And I do apologize for the slight hiccup in the middle of my presentation. Thank you, Everton.
Thank you very much. You could stop sharing your screen now, please. Thank you very much. So thank you, Steve, for your nice presentation. Some interesting, maybe dreadful situations you showed there. We're going to talk about them after all the presentations. Thank you. Now I have the honor to introduce you to Wolfgang Kinzelbach. Wolfgang Kinzelbach studied physics at the University of Mainz in Munich and environmental engineering at Stanford University. He earned his doctorate in environmental engineering from Karlsruhe University of Technology in 1978. His professional activities have taken him to Maiduguri, Nigeria, the Nuclear Research Center in Karlsruhe, and the Environmental Research Institute of the Academia Sinica in Beijing. In 1988, he was appointed full professor of technical hydraulics and hydrology at the University of Kassel in 1993, full professor of environmental physics at the University of Heidelberg. Since 1996, he has been full professor of hydromechanics and groundwater at the ETH Zurich. His research focuses on flow and transport processes in the environment, with practical applications in water resources management, pollution control, remediation, and nuclear waste isolation. His current main interest is sustainable water resources management in arid and semi-arid regions, mainly in Africa and China. Among other honors, he was awarded the Corber European Science Prize, Henry Darcy Medal of the European Geophysical Society, the Saudi Arabian Prince Sultan International Prize for Water, and the Mülheim Water Award. He is a fellow of the American Geophysical Union and a distinguished affiliated professor of the Technical University of Munich. He has published 5 books and more than 200 ISI articles. Since his retirement in 2004, he's still working, you see. Since his retirement in 2014, he has been heading the China groundwater project of the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. The project has the title, Rehabilitation and Management Strategy of Overpumped Aquifer Under Changing Climate, with case studies in Guantao, Hebei, and Zhangye, Gansu. Again, the questions may be sent by our app. Please download, or directly on YouTube. This session has simultaneous translations into Portuguese, also in YouTube. Please make sure you direct your questions to one of our guests. And for those of you who doesn't know Wolfgang Kinzelbach, I'm pretty sure you use his equation for sorption of organic compounds. You may not know, but he's been very useful for your professional career. Thank you very much, Wolfgang, to join us here. It's again an honor and a pleasure to have you. Please. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Everton, for your nice introduction and your kind words. I'm now sharing my screen.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm fine. So my subject is the North China Plain and the overpumped aquifers of the North China Plain. This is a joint project with many institutions, one of them GIWP, and you will hear from GIWP's Vice Director after myself. Now, overpumping of aquifers due to agricultural irrigation is a worldwide phenomenon. The usual culprits, you know, in California, the High Plains aquifer, Spain, India, and the North China Plain, and that is the one we talk about today. It is limited by the Taihangshan Mountains, the Yanshan Mountains, the Bohai Sea, and the Yellow River. So that is what I talk about when I say North China Plain. Now, a quarter of annual abstractions in the world are not sustainable. That means they cannot continue forever. They will run into a limit. Either the aquifer is dry, or the water quality changes, or it becomes too expensive to pump. Now, long before this happens, there are undesirable consequences of overpumping. And one is when the water table goes down, you will reduce the stream flows. The soil subsidence will set in. You will have increase of pumping costs. At the coast, you get seawater intrusion when the groundwater is lower than the water level of the sea. And this is important now in times of climate change. With loss of storage, you lose resilience of agriculture against droughts. And that is why we would like to stop the depletion rather sooner than later. Now, if you look at the North China Plain with the images from the GRACE mission. The GRACE mission is measuring the gravity changes in time. And here you see the gravity change between 2003 and 2012. And gravity changes if you move a lot of mass from one place to another place. Now, the only substance which is moved in these large quantities to make a dent in this gray pictures is water. And well known is the melting of glaciers. When a glacier melts, the water goes away from that place and flows to the ocean. Now here in the North China Plain, I assure you there are no glaciers. So this depletion of, or this decrease in gravity is due to depletion of groundwater. There are also places where you have both depletion of groundwater and glacier melt, and they are not so easy to separate. But here we have no problem. We see the depletion of groundwater. And from 2003 to 2012, the depletion was in total about 80 billion cubic meters. That's 80 cubic kilometers. That's about twice the storage of the Three Gorges Reservoir. By the way, you see a place here where gravity has increased, where water has been stored. And this is exactly the Three Gorges Reservoir, which during this time has been filled. Now, the abstraction in North China Plain is about 20% above the sustainable level. So you would have to reduce all the pumping, the consumptive use, as Stephen said correctly, the consumptive part of pumping by about 20%. Now, overpumping is not homogeneously distributed. Here you have maps where you see the cones of depression where they are located. And you have to know two things. Number one, groundwater is not the only user of, agriculture is not the only user of groundwater. It uses 65%. And households and industry use the rest of 35%. And another thing you should know is that although the overpumping in the, there are two aquifers, a shallow aquifer system and a deep aquifer system. And although the pumping in the shallow aquifer system is more than in the deep aquifer system, the drawdowns created are less in the shallow aquifer than in deep aquifer. Why? Because the shallow aquifer is a phreatic aquifer, so it stores with the porosity, whereas the deep aquifer is a confined system and you have a very low storage coefficient by the elasticity, etc. So these are the facts on the ground, and it's very homogeneous distribution. So you cannot have a measure which fits everybody for the whole of North China Plain. You have to look into the details in sub-regions. One more remark on the two aquifers. The shallow aquifer is usually not of drinking water quality. It has a high mineralization of more than 1 gram per liter. In some places, it's not even utilizable for irrigation. And the shallow aquifer, the deep aquifer, on the contrary, has usually fresh water, good drinking water quality, and less than 1 gram per liter of total dissolved solids. Now, because of this heterogeneity, we focus on one place where we do a more detailed study of how to stop groundwater overpumping. And this is this place is Guantao County in the southern part here of the North China Plain. Here you see a satellite image and see all the green areas are fields, and these light areas in between are the villages. So our county here has about an area of 456 square kilometers, and 300 square kilometers of it are irrigated mainly by groundwater. Why? Well, the cropping system in the whole of the North China Plain is a double cropping system. It has developed from a very low productive system, maybe 60, 70 years ago, to a very productive double cropping system, which is dominated by winter wheat and summer maize. And these two together need about 800 to 900 millimeters of water to grow. Now, the average rainfall in Guantao is about 500 millimeters. That means there is a deficit, and you need to add irrigation to the tune of about 300 millimeters per year. Now, this rainfall of 500 millimeters happens mainly in summer with the summer monsoon, but winter wheat, of course, needs the water in the season where there is no precipitation. So this deficit is mainly for winter wheat And in those days, in winter, you also don't have high flow in the rivers or in the streams. You have no flow even. And that means you mainly have to use groundwater to fill this gap in water demand. So the task is to reduce groundwater abstraction. Now, how to do it? Well, we were setting up a monitoring, modeling, and control system. And to do that, you need these three subunits or three modules. One is the monitoring, to know what is happening. Then you have to analyze the data to see how much you have to do to stop the further decline of groundwater levels. And then you have to put these conclusions into the practice by implementation of policies. And then in the next year or over next year, you gradually see whether your policy is active, is effective or not. Now, what did we do with monitoring? Here you see, yes, the monitoring is done by automatic data collectors in the wells, in observation wells, and we have a whole system of observation wells in this county. There are some older measurement stations where you can see the long-term development of groundwater levels for the shallow groundwater and for the deep groundwater. In the shallow groundwater, you see that after 2000, the slope of the overpumping of the groundwater decline becomes less. So something has happened, and it's two things. It's number one, that groundwater saving started, and number two, the rains increased compared to the situation here, where this last decline was exactly in a time of decreasing rainfall. So these two things work together, that this decline has become small. But on the other hand, the deep aquifer, which has no local recharge in Guantao, has increased. The declining rate has increased after 2000. So even more groundwater is pumped from the deep aquifer than before. Now, the deep aquifer actually should pump zero because it has no recharge, and every pumping will produce a drawdown. Now, the second thing which is monitored besides groundwater level is the pumped volumes. And the way it is done is by electricity use. I will say a few more words in the next slide on that. But for the first time, we now know how much water each village is actually using. And this is converted from the electricity use. Actually, all wells in Guantao are powered by electricity. And that is the clue to knowing how much is pumped, and it's also the clue to control. And finally, we can look at the land use by remote sensing. We have high resolution remote sensing, 10 by 10 meter, and we improve the observation situation by also using radar remote sensing, which can penetrate clouds and haze. And so with all these data, we have a very good picture of what is grown. And this is the winter situation, where the only green thing in spring is the winter wheat. So winter wheat is very easy to monitor, and as it is the major crop for causing depletion, it is very good that we can monitor it that well. Now, one word on the pumping wells. Now, these pumping wells are privately dug by the farmers. They are very primitive, and you can't even equip them with the smart water meters which are nowadays available, which are operated by swipe card. It's not possible. But no matter how primitive a well is, it is pumped with electricity. And electricity is metered because people have to pay for electricity. And that is why we decided to do the estimate or the measurement of pumping by conversion from electricity. So we did many pumping tests at wells to establish the conversion factor between the pumping rate and the power, which are both measured sometimes by primitive, sometimes by more sophisticated means. What has greatly improved and is a great success is that now daily measuring data are available by smart electricity meters, and all the wells, about 8,000 in Guantao, have been equipped with these automatic smart electricity meters. They send their data directly to the utilities, so we know every day how much is being pumped. Now, the conversion factors, of course, vary from well to well, but I can show you average values for the shallow aquifer. You get about 2.62 cubic meters for every kilowatt hour invested. From the deep aquifer, it's only about 1/2 of that. And also the surface water from the canal, we estimate through electricity, because it is pumped from the canals with a smaller lift, of course, and that is why you get 13 cubic meters per cubic meter. I'm sorry, I cannot talk. So now the daily. Let's look at the second module, that is modeling and decision support. So here you see what we do with modeling. First of all, we want to have a groundwater balance, because once we have a balance, we know what is the gap which we have to fill by measures. We want to predict groundwater levels over the next season by models, and we want to take decisions on the measures to take. So here you see the groundwater balance for 1 year, and you see the gap is about 17.6 million cubic meters per year, which is about 20% of total groundwater use. And this gap is made up of a part of groundwater which comes from the deep aquifer and a part which comes from the shallow aquifer, more from the shallow than from the deep. But the contribution to the gap is larger in the deep aquifer because it has no recharge. So how do we fill these 17.6 cubic meters per year, by which measures? Now, the distribution even within Guantao is not homogeneous. You see there is a depression cone, and this is a district with a high proportion of greenhouses which save water because of the plastic sheeting, which prevents water from evaporating away. But on the other hand, they produce over the 4 seasons in the year, and that makes the use even higher than the use of a field with double cropping of winter wheat and summer maize. Now here, these are the possible measures. We can do soil conservation, has a low potential. We can do water saving by new cultivars and new irrigation techniques. We can also fallow winter crop, do less agriculture. And we think in most cases, this is the clue to get back into equilibrium between the plants and the water resources. So this has a big potential, but it's not cheap because it can only be done by paying subsidies to the farmers. So all these demand side options are subsidy driven. Then we have some supply side options. You can import water from the Yellow River. It's not very efficient because the water comes in the wrong time. In the irrigation season, they need the water themselves in the upstream. And in the season where there is a lot of rain, well, you have your own rain, you don't need that water. So whether you can use it efficiently depends on how much you can store. And this is something which is not yet well developed. It is cheap water, but not efficient in use. You can also import more safely water from the south-north water transfer, but this water is quite expensive. And presently, it's used only for households to replace the groundwater they have been pumping from the deep aquifer. You can, about half of the households in use in Guantao is covered by this, and another 4 million per year can still be covered. Now, there is also the possibility of importing water from the south, but on the eastern route, this connection is not yet built, but when it is built, it will be able to provide more water. Now, all these modules, which are single things, they have been kept together or put together in one unique decision support system on the computer, and it assists decisions on surface water import, fallowing areas, and water saving in accordance with groundwater targets, hydro level targets. And the lower limit of the groundwater level is defined by the maximum reduction of yield of the wells, which we allow, and a reserve for 4 consecutive drought years. And this level is about 30 meters below ground. The average level among underground Guantao is not yet 30 meters, it's 22.3 here, you see it. But in some places it is lower, it's already very close to the 30 meters. So we have to actively manage that level. Now, let me look at the policies. Now, there's basically two things. The allocation of subsidies for fallowing and water-saving irrigation. And water-saving irrigation includes that people return to rain-fed cropping, which you can do in summer if you plant only a summer crop. The second thing is the introduction of water fees and the payment of water fees according to a three-tiered scheme. So you have a certain water right, where the water is for free, not for free, but you only have to pay the electricity to pump it. And then there is another level where you have to pump an additional 10 Chinese cent. And then there is an even higher level. When you go above that, you add another 10 Chinese cent on the price. So this price for the cost of pumping, that is maybe around 30 cents for a cubic meter in the shallow groundwater and about 80 cents for the deep groundwater. So you see 10 or maximum 20 are added on top of this. There are subsidies for water-saving equipment, but this kind of equipment cannot be used in small family farms. You need a farm of at least some 10 hectares or so that you can use this equipment fruitfully. Now, the remote sensing can check whether people who get money for fallowing really do fallowing. Because of the high resolution, we can easily distinguish between a field which has been planting winter wheat in the last year and which is not planting winter wheat in this year, just by taking the difference of two remote sensing images. Now, let me come to the conclusions for Guantao. So the most effective overpumping control measures so far are the subsidized fallowing of winter wheat and water imports from the Yellow and Yangtze River, although only a small part of it is really effectively used. It has led to the good result that during the project now, the shallow aquifer decline rate is almost zero. In the last year, it even went up a bit. But the deep aquifer is not yet solved. It still goes down. Although it was decided in 2017 to stop all pumping from that aquifer, it's not yet possible to stop. And one of the reasons is that the salinity in some places of the shallow aquifer is too high for irrigation. So farmers have to dilute the shallow water with the good deep water in order to guarantee their yield. Now, the electricity to pumping volume conversion has shown to be an effective and feasible method for metering the many small irrigation wells in North China Plain. The water fees for overstepping have been calculated, but they are not implemented. This is one reason is the farmers are against it. There is a resistance, and even in China, you cannot really do something against the collective power of the farmers. And but the other reason is that the sums are so small that collecting it is more expensive than the sums you get together. Now, we suggest that the fee, as also indicated by Stephen, is collected together with the electricity used because it's also proportional to electricity, and that the utility collects both together. This is still an institutional problem, but in Guantao, I think we are on a good way that the two, the electricity utility and the water resources department, will cooperate and in the end have this common collection. Now, the water saving potential is low because you really have to save consumptive water use, that is unproductive evaporation. Now, this is not possible for the small farmers, but it will increase somewhat when small family farms are merged to large farms. This is an ongoing process, and they can then practice precision agriculture. The final solution to overpumping in Guantao will come with the prolongation of the eastern route. Sorry, this is a wrong word. Eastern route of the South-North Water Transfer Scheme into Hebei province. Now let's look on the way for the whole of North China Plain, where to go. Now the most efficient measures is of course the reform of the double cropping system. And we see that a reduction in irrigated area of 30% can save about 4 billion cubic meters per year. So it can cover all the deficit. The downside is it is contrary to food security demand in China, and there is a loss of revenue of farmers of about 100 billion Chinese yuan per year. The other efficient measure is the import of water from the south, presently about 4 billion cubic meters per year, replacing groundwater pumping mainly by household and industry. and it could be increased by another 2 to 4 billion per year. But the downside is it's too costly for agriculture, and the demand in the south is growing, so they cannot continue to give more and more water. So this is contradictory, and a balance must be found between the two, between the reduction of agro-production and water transfer. There is no silver bullet. Many smaller measures exist, and their mosaic has to contribute locally to the solution of the problem. These smaller measures include water-saving irrigation, managed aquifer recharge, no-till planting, new cultivars, etc. Now, the present massive imports of water to the region have already measurably slowed down overexploitation. Changing the balance is possible in the short term, but filling the cones of depression takes a long time. It took 80 years or 50 years to dig them. Now it will also it will take longer time to fill them, because you cannot have as much excess as you were pumping in the first place. Now, there is hope, though, and the hope is shown here. This shows the projection of the Chinese population. Now here you see the recent census, 1.44 billion, and the prediction is that by the end of the century, Chinese population declines to about 1/2 of today. Now 1/2, that also means that the water demand, the food demand, the energy demand, everything is going down. And while many people fear the population decline, I think it's a very good thing. It allows to finally reach sustainability in water, food, and energy. And with this, I want to close, and I want to acknowledge the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, who funded the project, the Chinese Ministry of Water Resources, and the China Geological Surveys, which dug all the observation wells for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. I liked it very much. Thank you, Wolfgang. Now, just a moment here. I have to just adjust myself. After this nice presentation, I have the honor to introduce you Yuanyuan Li. Yuanyuan Li is Vice President and Professor of the General Institute of Water Resources and Hydropower Planning and Design, GIWP, at the Ministry of Water Resources, MWR of China. His fields of expertise include water resources management water resources management mechanisms, interactions between human activities and water resources system analysis and planning, and water ecology and environmental protection. He has led many water resources surveys at a national level, strategy studies, comprehensive water resources planning, major water projects technological demonstration, water policies formulation, and management activities, as well as international programs and cooperation. His research results have been awarded numerous science and technology awards. He is currently the Vice President of the International Water Resources Association, IWRA. Again, the questions may be sent by our app. Please download it or send the questions directly on YouTube. This session has simultaneous translations into Portuguese, also on YouTube. Please make sure you direct your questions to one of our guests. Thank you very much, and thank you, Yuanyuan, for your presence, and an honor and a pleasure to have you here. Please, now it's your turn. Thank you.
Thank you, Everton, for your kind introduction. I'm going to share my screen, see if
Not yet.
can you see the screen?
Not yet.
Oh, let's see. Okay, let me.
Yep.
It's coming.
Yes, here.
Okay. Okay.
Yep, perfect.
Hello. Yeah, hello. Good evening, everybody from Beijing, and I hope you enjoy this sessions. I would like to give you some introduction on the groundwater overexploitation rehabilitation in North China Plain. Actually, Wolfgang already mentioned something, so I probably try to make it short. So first one is situation of the ground overexploitations. As Wolfgang have mentioned, for this North China Plain areas, the total water resources only takes about 4% of the national total average. But the population they support is about 25%, and the GDP production is about 27%. And more important is, as the two previous presentations have been mentioned, 25% of the irrigation area and the cropping productions, particularly the wheat, because wheat is one of the staple food in China. So this makes groundwater situation very serious. It's really overexploitation of these areas. So by the year 2019, the total groundwater depletion compared with 1980s, the deficit is we call it is about 180 billion cubic meters. So the total overexploited area is about 180,000 square kilometers, which almost covers most of this North China planning areas. The average yearly overexploitation is something about 66 to 7 billion cubic meters. So that's very serious groundwater overexploitations. So we call North China Plain is world largest groundwater overpumping areas. So the consequence, second. So the depletion of the groundwater and the overpumping, there are several reasons. Where of course one is water increase, the water use increase, and also because of during past 2 decades, the water resources in the North China Plain is also reducing, and also the production, what they call the efficiency, production yield was also increasing. So the overpumping of groundwater have caused land subsidies, seawater and saline water intrusions, dry up of the river and the springs, particularly as Stephen mentioned, actually because of this overpumping, actually the total groundwater recharge and discharge pattern have been totally changed. Like in the planning area, the lateral discharge from groundwater to sea to the surface water is almost reduced about 97%. And in the mountain areas, because also there are a lot of the groundwater pumping also happens in there, the base flow was reduced about 30 to 40% in most places. So the totally changes the runoff and water, surface water, groundwater interactions. And of course, in some place, the groundwater have been lost their rules to resilient for the continuous drought and the strategic uses. So to facing that serious issues in China, as Wolfgang mentioned, actually we started some trial and pilot project in North China Plain. So we started in 2014 to take the Hebei province and to conduct the comprehensive rehabilitation of the groundwater, and furtherly enlarged to the whole province, and also furtherly enlarged to the other North China Plain province, including Beijing, Tianjin, Shandong, Shanxi, those provinces. So what do we do in this pilot projects of groundwater rehabilitation is? So mainly is two aspects. One aspect is reduce water use and demand. Another side is to increase the water supply and increase of the recharge. So we conduct some cropping pattern adjustment to try to reduce some wheat cultivations, and also to conduct the water saving through the agronomic measures and water saving irrigations. And also we do some water source replacement, like we use south to north water transfer water to supply for the cities, urbans, and industries. Then ask them to replace originally they used local surface water, then give back to the agricultures, then to reduce some of those groundwater uses. And after Hebei's trial pilot project in 2018, the State Council have approved an integrated action plan for groundwater rehabilitation in North China Plain, which including Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei, and other provinces. So by 4 different ministries we have done together. So what do we, the major measures is, what do we do is, number one is to conduct water saving programs in the irrigation areas. And second is to exploitation of the what they call the agricultural structure adjustment, including improve the cropping patterns, and also to change the industry structures and the layout, and also to increase what they call the water supplies for these regions, because this North China Plain is mainly not only overuse groundwater, but also overuse of surface water. So most of our river system have been dried out. So we provide the water transfers from outside, from the south to north water transfer, middle route and the east route, and also increase the Yellow River diversion to the North China Plains. And also more important is we redeployment of the local surface water after they have received the south to north water transfers. So actually they can reduce their local surface water consumption to give back to the agriculture. And also we have increased treatment standards of the wastewater, treated to the usable standards, and also can give back to the particularly to the river itself as an environmental flow, and also increase the recharge of the groundwater. So that's some of the major measures we have been conducted for these action plans. So those are some of these effects and consequence after conduct the different measures. I don't want to go to that. There are some lessons from this program and the rehabilitation of the groundwater. We have learned, I think, it's quite maybe important to improve the groundwater management. Number one, as Stephen mentioned, I think we need overall strategies. So the overall strategy is quite important, because why the situation in North China Plain was happened for this overpumping of the groundwater, because the agricultural ministries actually they have a responsibility to ensure the food securities. So you want more production of the green production, and particularly the wheat, because this is the most suitable place for the wheat, particularly for the winter wheat productions. And the Chinese people, two major staple food is one is winter wheat and one is rice. So this is there's no other place to growing this wheat. So actually they have some resistance to reduce the wheat cropping cultivations. So we have to talk with them. And also from the land resource ministries, actually they are concerning the arable land to control the reduction of this arable land, and also worry about what is called the land vegetation coverage, because as Wolfgang mentioned, is a double cropping areas. If you stop the winter wheat, so the land become to barren land, and also cause sand and soil erosions. And also we have the conflict from the farmer itself, because farmer, they also need to increase their incomes. So if you ask them to stop the winter wheat cropping, so they also need to solve the income issues of the farmers. So actually we needed to put all this together to formulate integrated plans. So that's number one we have learned. And the second, because of the dominant water use in this area is agricultural use. So you got to mobilize and pursue the farmers and involve the farmers participates in these programs and get them support. So we both need the top-down approach and also need the bottom-up supporting from the particularly the farmers. This is second. The third one is more important is actually this is what I call the water use of this area is totally over its iron capacities. So more important way is you have to increase water availability for these regions through the water diversions, and also through the recycling use of the water in these regions. So we have tried our best to increase these areas. And also another lesson we have learned is more important is groundwater monitoring and metering the system, as Wolfgang mentioned. That's quite important. You have to know how much water you have used, how much water is your water rights, and how much water you have to pay the high price for regulations. So that's number 4. And The number 5 is effective management regulations. Because you are dealing with each individual farmers and also dealing with different level of the local governments. So how to manage the groundwater? So now we are conducting our approach is we try to set up for each region, each county, according to their characteristic of the groundwater and the availability of the groundwater. Sorry, how much of the groundwater you can use, how much of the groundwater you can use for different, what kind of a purpose, how much of the water you have to reserve for the future, maybe not for future, but currently you have to reserve some surplus recharge to rehabilitate the long-time overpumping the aquifers, and then later become to a strategic reservoir for the special drought situation and accident uses. And also we try to set up the water level, what they call the target for each different areas and regions for the processing groundwater management. So that's some of our practice of the groundwater rehabilitation in North China planning, and also some of our lessons we have learned. And now we are trying to not only to handling the North China plan groundwater rehabilitation, but also try to enlarge it to the other areas in China. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yuanyuan. Quite an interesting situation you have there, and not an easy solution on your hands, I imagine, right? Not very easy. Thank you very much for your presentation, the three of you. Now we go for the question and answer session part. And to start the discussion, I would like to make a question for the three of you, and you decide who wants to take it first. That's on you guys, please. We see that when we're facing problems of overpumping aquifers in many places in the world, as Stephen has shown, and the situation in China is well presented and well studied. Not everywhere we have such a good study to interpret and see results. I like the way you put it. You know, we need a top-down solution and a bottom-up. How do you guys think we can make this ends meet? You know, coming from the bottom and coming from, you know, from the top and from the bottom. Will they ever meet? What is your experience, and how can we solve this thing? It's a tough question. It's an interesting problem. We hydrogeologists know technical solutions, but how can we manage, as Yuanyuan showed, too many actors playing there? Please.
I'll just come in with a couple of words. I think what is absolutely certain is that we need both top-down and bottom-up. But to make the meet, you know, you need finance. I mean, one of the things that comes very clear from the Chinese presentations is that they're having to subsidize people not to farm as the most, in the medium term, the most promising solution. And that needs money. And you're not going to get a dialogue between top and bottom unless, you know, money flows. And that would be my first point. I like the idea of much greater collaboration between electricity and groundwater use, because I think that the vast majority of farmers, not all of them, but the vast majority, don't expect to get free electricity. And if you can link groundwater charging and control to the electricity, you've got a much better chance than without. And there's a lot of assumptions that are needed to do that, but on the whole, you know, this is a doable thing, which Wolfgang has demonstrated clearly, and certainly was the case in Mendoza in Argentina, where I worked. That solution worked quite well, despite the fact that the electricity company and the Water Resources Regulating Agency were poles apart administratively. Once the concept was imposed on them at state government level, they got on with it and made it work. Those would be my initial comments.
Thank you. Good points. Who wants to take next?
Yeah, I think it's not an easy job how to combine this top.
Maybe I can add another idea, and that is China.
Your connection is a bit shaky. Wolfgang, please go.
China's agricultural structure is changing a lot these days. You know, many people do not want to continue farming because you cannot earn money. Listen, you have, as one person or as a family, you have about a third of a hectare. In Switzerland, a farmer to get a reasonable income needs about 100 hectares of land. So that's just worlds apart. So this farming doesn't earn money. The young people go to the city and they send money back to their parents. So that is the way things are developing. And many farmers were very happy to take the subsidy and not plant winter wheat because they didn't earn money for winter wheat in the first place. And the major earning was that they had their own supply and didn't have to pay for it. So this is the small scale farming, which is not economic. And that will change. Already now you have big farms who lease the country, the land from a village, a whole village, and it's done by one company. And at the moment, it's more niche products. But in the future, I think it will also work for wheat and maize. And then you have to talk to fewer people. Now you have to talk to these 8,000 wells. In future, when it is big farms, maybe it's about 800 or so. And then things, the dialogue becomes much easier. Now, the farmers are not stupid. They know that the water table is going down because many have to re-drill the well because the water level is gone. And we played games with them. We made a groundwater game, which I could also supply to the groundwater project. And in this game, when they saw that the groundwater level was getting low, and the rule was if the groundwater level goes to zero, everybody loses, not only the player who depletes it, right? And then they were very careful and they tried to save whatever they could. I think if they would see groundwater better, then they would be more conscious of what they are doing. The problem at the moment is that the groundwater is underground. Nobody sees it. That is one of the bad things of our resource, that you don't see it. And if you make it more visible, and we made some efforts to have some posters or automatic screens showing groundwater levels, then maybe people will be more cautious. So this is a hope I have. But I really hope that the big farms do it because they want to save money. And saving money means also to save water pumped. And that's something you have to do anyway. Now, there is one thing there, I would say each cubic meter not pumped is a cubic meter saved, and that is the deep aquifer, because the deep aquifer has no local recharge. So everything which goes out is lost. Nothing is going back. In the shallow aquifer, you pump a cubic meter and 20 or 30% go back, right? So you pump only 70%, but these 100% are real savings. So the main thing now is to stop this pumping from the deep aquifer. That is very important. Okay.
Yuanyuan, please.
Yeah, I think it's quite a difficult question, but we still face to that because groundwater, in most of the case and many places, they are subject to, there are a lot of individual pumpers and water users. But from the top level, from the government aspects, you got to think about this in strategic point of view, because some of these issues and problems cannot be solved by individuals and by the local government. You got to have the overall plan and strategies. So you need some top-down driving force, and also you need to mobilize, because this each individuals. So mainly, I guess, through the pricing, through the water right systems to mobilize and to involve these local people's participation. Because as Wolfgang mentioned, this farmer is also clever. They're looking about what they pay and what they get. So that's some of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question here from Roberto Kirchheim. Congratulations to the speakers on behalf of the Geological Survey of Brazil. Excellent contributions. Many possible questions, and I would like to stick to just one. To what extent has knowing the times of residence of groundwater in the aforementioned aquifers brought benefits to advance in its management? Who wants to take it?
I could say something for North China, of course. The residence times are very large. But what we can see is that there is, the old water is kind of getting less. There is always a mixture of water coming from the top and replenishing the deeper layers. And this is something which is of concern. It's of concern not so much because of the quantity, but of the quality of water. Number one, if you pump a lot in the deep aquifer, although there is a thick clay layer between the deep and the shallow aquifer, there is water going down, and this aquitard is very saline. So this saline water will eventually go down, and we see this process gradually starting. It was already mentioned in Stephen's paper on the North China Plain many years ago. And I think now we see that this is not only a theory, it's happening. And then this renewal of the old water by some water above brings a quality issue. So I think it's a very important question which has been asked by that person. And if we know the residence time better, maybe it's another indication for our planning how much we want to pull down, right?
Thank you. You guys want to add something? Steve, Yuanyuan? Fine? Okay, guys, our time is up here. Well, I would love to stay. You know, the topic is so interesting, and we could profit from your presence, but you know, we have time restrictions here. I'd like you to please make your final statement before we finish. We have 2 minutes more. If you could go, let's follow the order. Stephen first, please.
Okay, yes, I'd just like to return and reflect on the places where there has been some success in stabilizing water tables, ones I've been involved with at least partially, and I mentioned Bangkok, and I mentioned Lima, and I mentioned Mendoza. There are others. In those cases, it was clear that, well, there were ways in which the user community, the groundwater user community, were aware of the problems they were creating by continuous overexploitation. In the case of Lima, they knew where the base of the aquifer was. They tried to drill deeper, and they're not getting much extra yield. So they knew that they were in some areas approaching the limits of saturated thickness and therefore the limits of water availability, and they knew they were in a desert. So they knew something had to be done. Money was needed to do the necessary things, but they knew that it was a high priority. In the case of Bangkok, the groundwater extraction regime up until about 2000 was causing land subsidence at such a rate that it was affecting people, all people, including the groundwater users, because it was greatly increasing the risk of flooding by tidal surges with increasing sea level. And the will to move there came from that cause. We have bigger challenges where on the larger aquifer systems where the user community are not really conscious of the nature of the problem. And this is where we're going to need bigger powers to get the user community mobilized. And I think that the ways of doing that, we haven't exhausted yet, but we've got to find ways of getting the groundwater message across in those situations. That's probably my final word.
Thank you very much, Steven. Thank you very much for helping us here. It's always an honor having you around with all your knowledge. Thank you. Wolfgang, your turn, please.
Okay. I'm not so pessimistic about this groundwater overpumping because it is a process which, if you do it, you kind of get to a situation where you just can't continue. So it will stop itself. There is some self-stopping mechanism involved. That is a good thing. But of course, things may become very serious as far as food production is concerned. And, I was always very skeptical of this south-north water transfer. But now I see it's the order of magnitude which is needed to solve the problem, at least until you get over the population bump. I'm optimistic because population will go down. That is, it happens in Europe, it happened in Japan, it will happen in China, it will happen everywhere. And then when we get over the bump with these extreme measures, like the south-north water transfer, then we can at least in the future then stop this kind of thing and become sustainable again. That is my idea on the whole thing. I think what worries me much more now in the North China Plain is the groundwater quality issue. So quantity, I think this is solvable, but the quality, that is something which stays very long with us, especially as your colleague mentioned, with the long residence time. So this is something I think one should start immediately now in order to prevent a future big problem.
Thank you very much. Quite interesting point of view. Thank you very much, Wolfgang, for your words. Again, it's an honor and a pleasure having you around here. Now, Yuanyuan, please, your final statement. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, I think groundwater issue problem, either quantity issue and quality issue, usually they are developed step by step. They are slowly. So sometimes you're not visible, you're not feeling that. But once you got the big issues, sometimes the problem cannot be recovered, invisible. So we got to think about the groundwater in a strategic ways. So for the scientists, we need to look at the interaction changes of the groundwater, surface water, and the groundwater cycle, and how to define the proper, exploitable, sustainable groundwater amount, and how to protect the water quality of the groundwater. For the decision makers, they needed to think about the strategic ways and to proper deploy the groundwater resources. What is used for the environmental, or how much was used for the strategic reserve, and how much only small amount for the regular uses, something like that. For the managers, groundwater managers, we needed to have a more precise tools, monitoring to more accurate manage the groundwater resources. That's my final feeling. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. You have we have to follow, closely what's going on with you guys, because you're solving a big problem. We'll learn from you. Thank you very much for presenting this work for us. That was quite interesting. So thank you, the three of you. And we're coming to the end of our session, Rehabilitation and Management of Overpumped Aquifers in a Changing Climate. part of the free online programming of the Groundwater World Congress. Once again, I thank the participation of Stephen Foster, Professor of the University of College London, Wolfgang Kinzelbach, ETH Zurich, Head of Sino-Swiss Groundwater Project, Yuanyuan Li, Vice President and Professor of the General Institute of Water Resources and Hydropower Planning and Design, GIWP, Ministry of Water Resources, MWR of China. Thank you very much, the three of you. Thank you for the audience, all of you who watches us. Tell your friends, spread the news, learn from us. Groundwater is so important. We have to tell everybody how to take care of the water of our planet. Thank you very much, the three of you. It was a pleasure to have you all around. Thank you. Thank you for the audience. We hope that you like the content. Follow Abbas, IAH, and Al Sud on social networks. Download the event app and participate in our WhatsApp groups, which warm up our presential event. Thank you very much. See you soon. Bye.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.